The swamp's dangerous. There's a woman made of mushrooms deep within it. Her head's like a mushroom cap, and her skin's like fungus. She lures travelers and never lets them leave. Stay on the path and keep your wits about you.
Hello and welcome to Miniage Painting. Today I want to paint another printed model for you all. This time it comes from Witchsong Miniatures, and the model is called the Fungal Queen. This video is not sponsored by them in any way. I just thought this model is amazing, and I wanted to paint it for you all. Without further ado, let's get to painting. We are going to start with a black primer with a zenithal spray of white scar from a rattle can. Zenithal highlights work wonders for large prints like this, as it helps me to find all the details and decide where I want to have certain colors. We start the painting off with the airbrush by getting some Mephiston red applied to the cap of the mushroom. Like with the last video, I'm using the airbrush for the smooth and quick base coating that it provides. With the red down, we can take some Wa flesh and spray this onto the corset that she has. It's very important that we do not hit any of the flowing dress with this color accidentally, as it will interfere with the color that we apply here. Because of this, I will not spray the whole area, and I'll come back later with a brush and paint any parts that I'm too worried about messing up. With the green mostly down, I'm going to mask off the dress with blue tack so I can do the next color without worrying about accidentally spraying said dress. Blue tack is an invaluable tool in my arsenal, as it can be reused so much without ever losing its effectiveness. Let's spray the legs, underside of the cap, face, and outstretched hand with Rekarth flesh. The airbrush helps to get a nice clean coat of this color super fast, as it usually takes quite a bit of work to get this color to have a nice consistency. With the Rekarth flesh sprayed, let's take some dryad bark and apply this to the fungal ankles of this queen. I want to do this so I can get the start of a nice transition between the colors. The airbrush just makes it easier to do that. While we have this color in the airbrush, let's take it and quickly spray some color onto the wood of the base. Now we can peel off the blue tack and admire how it has done its job protecting the colors underneath. Oh, the many uses of this wonder material. Next, I will use a regular brush for some details. To begin, we are going to clean up the area around the legs that the blue tack covered. This is much easier to do than trying to paint all of the legs. We will also paint the arm that is behind the back. I wasn't comfortable spraying such a small space with the airbrush, for fear of getting paint onto the dress. I'll also hit the rounded edges and the remnants of the veil left on the cap. Speaking of, it's time to paint the dress. We're going to use Lexion Purple straight from the pot and apply this in 2 coats over all of the dress. The zenithal highlight is really putting in some strong work here by highlighting colors for us while leaving the underside of the dress a darker color that will remain dark because of the properties of the contrast paint. Let's quickly reuse the Wa flesh and paint up parts of the corset we missed, as well as the sleeves and our shoulder guards. We'll later highlight this into being one of the main focal points of the model. With the green down, we can take some corn red and apply this to the blouse that the model is wearing. I'm going to end up leaving this part of the model dark with little to no highlighting in order to give the effect that it is shaded by the mushroom. I'll also take the same color and apply it to the inner folds of the dress to give it some color variation. The staff looks a little bland, so let's fix that. We can take some more dryad bark and apply this to the handle. At this point, we have most of the base coats down. I am leaving the base coats of the stumps and the end of the staff for later. Right now, we are going to take Reikland Flesh Shade and apply it to the face of the model and the underside of the cap. I want to apply this a bit heavily onto the cap to give it that shaded look, as well as add definition to the ridges. This next step is important, so I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with my description of what I'm doing. I'm taking some Reikland Flesh Shade and lining the edges of the model, as well as where the shade would be. I am then going to clean my brush and start to feather out this color into the lighter portions of the model. I'm going to do this so I can give the effect of those parts being subtly shaded. It's a small effect that might take an extra pass or two, but the overall effect is worth it. This next part, however, throws caution to the wind. We're going to smother the top of the cap with Cassandora Yellow. I want this cap to be bright and eye-catching, so I'm going to use this to turn red into a popping orange. For the green, we're going to shade with some liquid talent. Nuln Oil. We don't have to be too careful here, as the darker the shade is, the more the highlights will pop when we apply them to the raised details. The corn red will be shaded with Carroburg Crimson. This will deepen the reds, and if we don't highlight them, we'll leave them as a deep shaded color. Finally, we can finish the shading by taking Agrax Earthshade and applying it all over the dryad bark of the ankles and the staff handle. Of note, with the ankles, I will be using the same feathering technique I used with the Reikland Flesh Shade to pull some of the Agrax onto the legs proper. This helps to create more transition between the mushroom stalk skin tone to the barky mushroom covered ankle. Shading complete. Let's highlight now. We'll start by taking Troll Slayer Orange to the cap of the mushroom. By picking out all of the raised details, we can add visual interest to the focal point of the model. Moving down to the corset, we'll take Warpstone Glow and apply this to the folds, the boils on the ends, as well as some of the sculpted details on the chest. Moot Green is the final highlight of the corset, focusing on the highest points of the folds, some of the random boils, and the higher details of the chest. Let's go a bit more in depth with the skin tone and my process for this again. I'm taking Pallid Witch Flesh and thinning this down to a glaze. To start, I'm going to place some of this paint onto the thigh and then clean my brush. I can then feather this color out towards the shaded areas. I want to try and leave behind not only the shaded areas, but also leave behind some pure Rakarth flesh, as that will help to create a gradient for the mushroom stalk tone. I'll take this same color, still in a glaze-like consistency, and apply it to the remnants of the veil, focusing on the top side of the orbs, while leaving the underside and the strands the color they were before. This makes it look like light is hitting them. Mushrooms are much more than the tops that you see sprouting from the ground. Most of the actual mushroom is a substance called mycelium, and it lives and grows like roots underneath the ground. I want to try and achieve that effect by taking white scar and running it along some of these raised details that surround the ankles and the underside of her outstretched hand. This will help blur the imaginary lines that your brain draws by having a solid pattern bridging the gap. With that done, we can work on the base. Let's start by taking dryad bark and filling in any places that we missed with the airbrush. After that, we'll start work on the ground. Working from Caliban Green, we will paint it onto the floor. Then I'll take dryad bark and do some wet blending in order to get a gradient between the brown and the green. Once that's done, I'll take Nuln Oil to the green, feathering it into the brown to help with the transitions. Now, similarly to the ankles, we can apply some Agrax Earthshade to the bark of these trees. We can also feather some agrax into the green dirt. When those washes dry, we can then take some warpstone glow and highlight the raised edges on the ground. And with that, the ground is complete, aside from some static grass that I'll add at the end. Let's work on the stumps now. We shall start with Xandri dust. For this, I'm going to carefully paint all of the stumps on the base, as well as the underside without touching the brown. I'm also going to be extremely careful to do the same to the stumps on the legs of the queen. With the stumps colored in, we can apply some Athonian camo shade to them all. This will keep them as a warm color while giving them some much needed definition. Now, once that shade is dry, we'll take some Terminatus stone and do a very careful dry brush of the stumps in order to pick out the edges. I probably should have used a smaller dry brush, but I think it turned out well. With the base almost complete, I want to do something special for the rim, so I'm going to make it gold. I'll achieve this by painting it with Retributor armor. Once I have a nice solid coat of gold, I'm going to take a generous amount of Reikland flesh shade to the gold. This will give it more of a tarnished look and help pick out some of the nice details. Finally, we can take some PVA glue and spread it around the base in places that we want some static grass. I want to make sure that I don't get any grass into the spots where her feet go, as that'll make gluing her down a bit more difficult later. Now I'll just dump some static grass over the PVA glue, and then flip it over to tap off any excess grass that isn't glued down. I'll do this again in a few hours to make sure there aren't any loose stragglers. To wrap up this project, I'm going to take some colorful static flowers that I got from Huge Miniatures and put a little bit of super glue on the bottom in order to make sure they stay there. They have some adhesives, but I like to make sure they won't go anywhere. With that done, we can glue her down and get ready for a grand reveal. Once again, thank you for watching. The amount of growth that my channel has received recently has been amazing. I'm so thankful to everyone that has subscribed, and I can't wait to make more painting and kit bashing videos for you all. See you next time.